Okay, so this is the structure you want to follow for your analysis. Again, I'm really hesitant to say structure because I don't want you guys to follow it as rigid as this. You can put your technique before your effect. You can talk about your effect of the technique before you've even introduced your evidence. Completely up to you. Again, guidelines, right? You want to follow these different elements in you want to make sure your piece has all these different elements. So actually, I haven't even went through them. So first you want to introduce your evidence. Okay, not first. One of the things you want to do, obviously, is introduce your evidence. Then talk about the techniques present in your evidence. Then talk about the effect of each individual technique. You're talking about symbolism, what's being symbolically referenced here. You're talking about metaphor, what's being metaphorically referenced. You're talking about polysyndeton, where is a polysyndeton, what is it doing? And then effect of the quote. So effect of the technique and effect of the quote is different. How or why? See how we spoke about synecdoche, I'm always going to struggle with that word, and spoke about what the effect of that is, and then it contributed to the overall depersonalization and the cruelty of the Holocaust. Okay, so we had individual analysis of just that technique and how it kind of related to the overarching point. We're going to look at more pieces of evidence of that though. Okay, then you want to relate to the big idea. What is the big idea? Your overarching argument of the paragraph. Okay, what you're trying to say all throughout your paragraph. So let's look at this sample analysis of an imaginary student, aka me. This is bad, okay? I'm going to critique myself here and say that this that I wrote was awful, but I did it intentionally, okay, to my defense. Nonetheless, let's have a read of this. So, this thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine. That is a quote from The Tempest, okay, a play that you might study. Through anastrophe, active voice, and a short, simple sentence structure, Shakespeare demonstrates how taking personal responsibility, in this case for Caliban's actions, forges a path for moral growth. So, again, this is doing what we don't want to do. Through these techniques, this is what we see, okay? We don't want that. The overall effect of the quote is correct, okay? There is the overall effect of the quote, but you didn't talk about what each individual technique here is doing. How do we achieve this through these techniques? Okay, the techniques are correct. There are, in fact, these three techniques in this quote, but what are each of them doing? So essentially, these two haven't actually been bridged. I don't know how from this we got to here. Instead, we want to do something like this. This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine. Shakespeare's subtle use of anastrophe centers the first person pronoun, foregrounding Prospero's desire to take personal responsibility for Caliban's immorality. This effect is heightened by the use of active voice and a short, irrefutable sentence structure that color Prospero's tone with decisiveness. Thus, audiences may observe how personal responsibility leads to moral growth. So, can you see how we have went through and said, all right, what's the effect of this technique? What's the effect of this technique? It's okay that both of these techniques, the effect of both of these techniques were grouped together because they achieve the same effect. So if both of your techniques achieve the exact same effect, you can do that. That will often be the case for things like active voice and sentence structure. It's very rarely the case for things like metaphors. Similarly, you can't really group those things together. Usually it's more to do with structure that you can group together or repetition. Nonetheless, we've spoken about the effect of each individual technique. Then we related it to this big overarching effect of the quote, okay? And audience effect. This is more what we want to do rather than this. And here is another example of that. So this is what I keep talking about, right? My personal pet peeve when I'm marking, things that I don't want to see. So things like, through the use of a metaphor in, her pain was a bullet lodging deeper and deeper into her soul, which is a quote from, do I have it there? No, sorry. It's a quote from some text that you may study in either year 11 or 12. The composer demonstrates the theme of hardship as he figuratively states the adversity of the protagonist. I don't want to see that, okay? what is this metaphor? What's being metaphorically referenced? Okay, and you only have one technique there. I need more techniques. So instead of that, we want to work towards this. The composer's use of metaphor and repetition in "Her pain was a bullet lodging deeper and deeper into her soul" personifies the adversity of the central protagonist and illustrates, how incessant the protagonist's trauma is. Okay, so three techniques there. This crafting is quite impactful in portraying the experience of hardship that the protagonist endures to readers, where they understand the power and suffering attributed to the protagonist's hardship. We've done all of that now, okay? That's what we want to work up to. You can now see the difference in sophistication between this kind of more band 4 response and this band 5, band 6 response. Don't stress if this is you right now. As I keep saying, use year 11 as the time to build off this skill. So this is a kind of minor thing. In your writing, when you're introducing a quote, you don't need to say things like, "In the quote we can see," or "This can be seen in the quote." This can be seen in. Don't need to say that. Just literally insert the quote without any preamble before. So do, however, contextualize the quote with the concept you are trying to explain, okay? The best way to do this is use the quote to explain your ideas. So things like, Richard's character is contorted by a Machiavellian desire for power. Indeed, his opening soliloquy declares, now is the winter of our discontent. So you can see that I'm trying to talk about how Richard's character is contorted or distorted by a Machiavellian desire for power. Okay, so he's overly ambitious. And I'm proving that with our evidence. I'm not saying, indeed, in the quote, now is the winter. I'm using it almost, it's really cohesive. It's really implemented in there really nicely. So this will help combat that blockiness that a lot of HSC markers talk about. Having it in there really cohesively integrated very nicely. You should also contextualize who is speaking and where in the plot we are situated. This doesn't really mean saying that in Act 1 or Chapter 3 of the text. No. Just kind of tell us who says that quote and generally what's going on, but not plot retell, okay? Maybe in like the first half of the sentence, just kind of ground me. Because sometimes if you are using a really different quote, which we like, but sometimes because it's not such a common quote as your marker, I can kind of be like, all right, who actually said this again? So just tell me. Here are some introductory phrases you can have in your writing to better integrate your quotes without saying within the quote, or this can be seen in this quote. So you can say things like, such a notion is epitomized by the protagonist's, soliloquy, and then insert the quote from the soliloquy. This is visualized in the protagonist's dialogue. Insert the piece of evidence from the dialogue. This is encapsulated by blah, blah, blah. Prosperous soliloquy, for example, captures this idea in this quote, whatever. Really the idea here is just use different ways of integrating the quotes so it's more cohesive and less blocky. You will develop your own style by reading sample essays and writing your own. So take from sample essays as you write it. Okay, so let's have a look at this now. So I will read this one. So it's no longer a magic staff, it's only a wooden stick. Felix upends the motif of the cane as a representation of the power of the theatre through reducing the symbolism of the cane to its mere metonym. This is further emphasized through his dismissive tone, where he finally rejects his performance and becomes liberated from his own performance of grief over the loss of his daughter, unshackling himself of the constraints of his self-imposed prison. That's... wow. If you're thinking, what the heck just went on? So am I. So don't stress. Let's have another read of that sentence together. This is further emphasized through his dismissive tone, where he finally rejects performance and becomes liberated from his own performance of grief over the loss of his daughter, unshackling himself of the constraints of his self-imposed prison. Wow. There's a lot happening there, and not in a good way. Firstly, it's super imbalanced. And why am I saying this? Because that's what I see when I tell students to do this. They try to put all of it into one sentence. No, this is what happens. Oh my gosh. Sorry. No. Yes? No. Sorry, I shouldn't go back. This is what happens when you try to integrate that all into one sentence. It's too much. Each sentence should have one main idea. There's just way too much going on here for me to even follow. Another thing you need to keep in mind is in prelims, this might happen, but this will certainly happen in the HSC. Again, I know we're not at the HSC yet, but we are approaching quicker than you may think. So it's good to start to have a think about it nonetheless. But your HSC marker isn't going to read your essay more than once. So your teacher might go over it, and then, oh, okay, that's what she meant, that's what he meant. Your HSC marker is not going to do that, okay? Your HSC marker is going to read it once, they don't understand it, too bad, I'm going to go on to the next essay, okay? It sucks, but it's the truth. So if you're someone that writes like this and you're not clear, your marker is not going to catch up. They're only going to read it once, they don't care. So what's the issue with this? Obviously, there's way too much going in the sentence. It needs to be broken up into each individual part. I'm not saying following this structure, but these parts need to still be in there, just separated from each other, so it's clearer for your marker to read. Also, it's a bit repetitive. We're talking about becoming liberated from his own performance and his own entrapment, and then we say it again, of his self-imposed prison, okay? We keep saying that. Not necessary, okay? So we want this instead. Atwood ultimately reveals the act of performing to itself be constraining, as Felix emphatically rejects the audience in the final scene. It's no longer a magic staff, it's only a wooden stick. As the symbolism of the cane is reduced to its mere metonym, Felix's dismissive tone upends the motif and finds liberation in refusing to assign metaphor to his life. So much clearer, so much better, okay? A lot of the time, it actually helps to take on the role of the marker for you to kind of know what you need to do yourself. So activities like this actually really help you because it's very hard to mark your own writing, believe it or not, which is why I kind of am hinting about giving it to your teacher and giving it to tutors and giving it to your siblings who maybe can help you. Because as you can see, it's harder to mark your own writing. But you were able to mark this with me, right? So it's important to do activities like this to know what you shouldn't be doing. Okay, so do end your intro analysis or paragraphs logically and smoothly by summarizing your arguments. So intro should always end with a statement synthesizing your argument and audience effect. Your introduction's final sentence should be addressing the audience effect. Ultimately, what is your composer teaching you, rebutting to you? What are they showing you about the world? What are they contrasting? Whatever. It needs to be audience effect, okay? And then your linking sentence should always be woven throughout your analysis. You shouldn't be topping and tailing. So what I mean by that is you shouldn't just be kind of throwing in your link to the question in the intro and in the final sentence. You need to be talking about the question all throughout. That is another big piece of or area of feedback that I want to kind of hone in on, okay? A lot of students in their practice writing, especially in year 12, so it's something to be mindful of now and kind of stop it while we can. A lot of students will give me great analysis, give me a great personal voice, give me great arguments, I'm blown away what they're writing, but it simply just doesn't answer the question. Okay, which is so sad for me because I must mark them through the eyes of the question, through the lens of the question. You can present to me the most beautiful piece of writing ever, but if it doesn't answer the question, it doesn't answer the question. Okay, I need you to answer the question for me. So that means not just doing it in the first sentence of your body paragraph and the final sentence, all throughout. Your argument needs to be tailored to the question. Now, this is what I was talking to you guys in the beginning about not having like that kind of rote learning and not having just memorized paragraphs that you're spewing out when you're doing your essays or when you're doing your assessments, because that's another way we can tell, okay, because you're not actually answering the question. Why? Because you didn't design that argument around the question. You designed it and now you're trying to force it onto the question. That's why, as I said, it's all about developing your idea around the question once you get into the exam room. yeah, I know it sounds like I'm kind of going on and on about this, but I cannot tell you how many students get marked down because of this. You haven't answered the question enough. That's something I can guarantee you, if you know any Year 12 students, go ask them, has your teacher ever mentioned that? Guarantee you they'll say yes, okay? It's the biggest thing students get marked on. Yeah. Okay, so ending without synthesizing is abrupt and doesn't sufficiently tie your argument together neatly. As I said, markers will not see how anything you've said so far links to your thesis. Yes. Okay.